Hello, I'm Doug Hawk. I'm our host for Engineering Leadership. I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's episode. I am a chemical engineering alumnus from Clemson University. And, our philosophy and our thinking here at Engineering Leadership is really summed up in a couple simple statements. First of which is that, we believe leaders are built, not born. And that like all things that are built, we can start with strong foundational fundamentals, and that really helps, whether you're building a bridge or road or a computer program, your success can be so much greater if you get those fundamentals laid in strongly and start from a great foundation. And that's a lot of what the topics we'll cover on these episodes are about. And joining me today is Bob Hambright, retired CEO of Balfour Beatty Construction, a leading international infrastructure and construction company. Bob's a mechanical engineering alumni. And each of the episodes we produce, we have asked our folks joining us to pick a particular constant, is what we call them, and key focus area for the discussion. Bob chose values, which is certainly one of the most important ones of the group. And with that being said, we'll dive right in. And I'll open, Bob, by just saying, we do think that obviously engineering can be fundamental to leadership, and that leadership can be empowered by nailing these foundational fundamentals. As you looked at all of them that we want to talk about, I guess I just opened by saying, why did you choose values, and what's the most important aspects of that you want to talk about today?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all, and exciting to be a part of this and to continue to give back to Clemson Engineering, especially in the area of leadership. But I've became a real student of leadership and trying to learn all I could about it. And probably the last 10 or 15 years of my career, and then of course I retired 10 years ago, and I began to do some lectures at a number of universities on leadership, just really sharing my experiences, and I would pick highlights of the pieces of leadership that I thought were important and worth sharing. And a few years ago, I guess 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe, I was preparing I would always try to build on what I had done before. And as I was pulling it together, I said, everything I'm talking about here is values. I mean, every piece that I had evolved in my mind about what was important was a discussion about values. And I said, really, values determine who you are. The things for you that are non-negotiable. They tell you how you feel about yourself. They tell you how you feel about others. And they also define the relationships that exist between you and others. And that's what leadership's all about. It's just that simple. And I sort of landed on values accidentally by just refining my message to what was important. And at the end of the day, it was all about values.
Yeah, that's a great tee up. You sent over a really interesting link when we were prepping for this discussion today, and the quote that stood with me that relates to values, but also how you take that values foundation and use it to empower leadership, right? And the quote that you had referenced was, "Stand on the perimeter and howl at the unknown with unbendable optimism," which I thought was a fantastic quote. But also, it's sort of, because in our framework that we've developed, values fall into the sort of orbit of what I call evangelize, right? So it's not enough to have them. We all need to have them, obviously, as good people, but leadership is about having them and then being able to get others to appreciate them, leverage them, believe in them, and follow a team that's on those, using those to drive their direction. So just you speak a little bit about that? It seemed like that quote had struck you as well. And
That goes to one of my values, and I have to admit I stole that. I spent a lot of time in Wyoming, and the University of Wyoming has a video called "The World Needs More Cowboys," and I just love it. And I shared it with Chris. I think you've seen it, and it said, and it gets to the point of curiosity, and I think that curiosity is a key value. You need to be curious. You need to you want to look for you want to push. You want to push the envelope. You want to you want to study things and not take everything for granted. I think curiosity makes you smarter. I think it makes you a lot more interesting. And those are all good things. It causes you want to embrace discovery. I think that one of the best things when I was growing up, I never traveled, but I was able to make up for it. And traveling is one of the greatest ways to discover to be curious, because you learn to put yourself in other people's shoes. And so another thing about curiosity is I noticed when we would be looking to hire people, to bring people on, every once in a while you would hear somebody describe a candidate as being, well, he or she is they have a curiosity. And I thought, man, I hope somebody will describe me that way one day, because whenever I would hear that, it would really make me look at that candidate differently and say, that's somebody I really like to have on my team, somebody who's curious. So that's one of the values that I sort of discovered later on in the process, but I think it's an important one.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I did a really cool experience a few years ago for me. I got to do a couple interviews with Fran Tarkington, who does a leadership development program for entrepreneurs and small businesses. And we hadn't talked about it, so it was very kind of ad lib. But he said, well, we were talking about sort of key characteristics that you're looking for in new hires and new team members, and we went down the typical list. Obviously, you want earnest folks who have good fundamental values and who also are hardworking and intelligent. But I said, I told him at the time, I said, one of the most underappreciated characteristics that I'm always looking for is curiosity, because it is so fundamental to pushing back those boundaries, figuring out it's a determination to see what's not on the page, right? Like it's one thing and as engineers, I think so often we can get focused on the calculation or the estimate or the technical material that is on the page, right? But actually advancing your work is so often dependent on that little bit of curiosity that drags you off the page into the darkness where you're going to discover new things.
Yeah, I do love that quote. That the one that I stole from the University of Wyoming, that it captures the essence of it for me. Stand on the perimeter and howl at the unknown with unbendable optimism that you're gonna find what you're looking for out there, and maybe find something you're not looking for out there. Curiosity is one of the sexier values. Some of them are a little more menial, like I always start with somebody's got to do the work. This was easier in my generation than it is today, I think, to talk about. But I never seen anybody do much that was important without a whole lot of hard work. My dad used to say to me, when I went off to my first job, he said, "Now you're gonna have a decision to make every day. You're either going to give the people you're working for just enough to get by, or you can give them a little bit more than they're paying you for. You know, it's the difference between coming in at a quarter till 8 or a quarter after 8. And he said, but at the end of the day, it'll make all the difference in the world. And boy, was he right. I mean, it's just such a little thing, but people notice that, and it does tend to, you know, you can outwork the competition sometime. I read a book, you probably read it too, The Outliers.
Yep.
And in there, he talks about how important hard work is, and he talks about, it's Malcolm Gladwell, who I really like a lot, and he talks about the Beatles, and he talks about Bill Gates, and he said, you know, you think these people just fell into it, but if you really go back and study, they put in hours and hours and hours of work to be ready for the opportunity that presented itself when it did. Because he said to the best of his knowledge, it looked like they had all put in about 10,000 hours of prep. I mean, the Beatles were in Hamburg, Germany, playing in these bars for 10 years, honing their what they did. And then, you know, so when their big break came, they were ready for it. And it's hard to shortcut hard work.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Bob. I think I was thinking about, first of all, I love that book. That's I love all his work, but that one in particular has stuck with me in a number of ways. And one of the things that sort of builds on that, and he does talk about, is, you know, there is, and this gets to the fundamentals of the philosophy behind, you know, sort of the mindset that I'm trying to make sure we explore is, you know, that, again, built, not born. Because I think, you know, there's another, you know, Mindset is a book by Carol Dweck that's one of the seminal sort of works on, you know, the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, and you know, sort of how one of the worst things you can tell somebody is, oh, you're just a natural, right? Because and that implies that whatever you're born with is what you have, and you make the most of that. But, you know, there's not a lot of building to do, right? So, which I think is toxic, especially young people, because it's, you know, it doesn't speak to the opportunity that's in front of them and available to them through hard work and development and continued, you know, just push and belief that you can continue to grow, right? And the reason that leadership to me is such a fantastic area to apply that way of thinking is that even despite, you know, and I think Gladwell's right that, you know, if you have the right combination of some fundamental talent, like let's take a basketball player, right? Like if you really love basketball and you want to practice 10,000 hours or 20,000 hours, if you're 5'2", probably still not going to be in the NBA, right? But what I tell people is, I said, well, leadership, that doesn't apply. Anybody who's determined enough to put in the work, to challenge themselves, to continue to develop, can be a good leader. You know, it doesn't, you can, you know, FDR led the country in the worst war that we've ever seen from a wheelchair. You know, that didn't come easy, right? But he wasn't prohibited from being a fantastic leader because he had a deficiency in one area, right? And that's, you know, so I think as we look at, you know, like the Beatles, I mean, I have no doubt they were a world beater band because of that effort and that 10,000 hours, but they did have to have some capability, right, to build on.
They were a good band, and Bill Gates was a smart guy.
Right. So I think, you know, and I love those examples, but I also love the differences that we can draw with leadership, because again, it doesn't matter what gifts you were born with. If you have enough determination and you're willing to put in the hard work and you're willing to challenge yourself and expose yourself to all the resources around you, you can determine to be a good leader. And it doesn't, you know, and it's not a matter of just leading a company or a team. You know, there are leadership opportunities every day in your family, in your community, in your church. You know, there are endless ways to step up and impact others with good leadership, which is what gets me so excited.
Let me take that point and if I can, I'd like to read to you the best definition of a leader that I have ever heard or read. And it's by Peter Senge from the book, The Fifth Discipline. And it really makes your point. And and I've read this 10,000 times because that's how much I love it. Most of the outstanding leaders I have worked with are neither tall nor especially handsome. They are often mediocre public speakers. They do not stand out in a crowd, and they do not mesmerize an attending audience with their brilliance or eloquence. Rather, what distinguishes them is the clarity and persuasiveness of their ideas, the depth of their commitment, and the openness to continually learning more. They do not have the answer, but they do instill in those around them that together we can learn whatever we need to learn in order to achieve the results that we truly desire. The ability of such people to be natural leaders, as near as I can tell, is the byproduct of a lifetime of effort to develop conceptual and communication skills, to reflect on personal values, and to align personal behavior with those values, to learn how to listen and to appreciate others and others' ideas. That to me makes your whole point. You know, if you're willing to commit to a lifetime of learning and develop what it takes, you can be a really great leader.
Excellent, excellent. I love that. We will definitely be stealing that quote.
You know, it is. You know, I was reading one of your questions and it was talking about who's had the most impact on you, and I guess that book and by that author, it's just a textbook of everything that is leadership. It's a terrific book. It was written by a guy, and he's a professor at MIT.
Great. Yeah, we'll put those links in the show notes too, to both Outliers and the Fifth Discipline, and make sure folks can find those easily. So you talked about hard work. You talked about curiosity. What are the other key values that you
kind of following on hard work, my game, and I think I've shared this with Chris. And if you commit to do that, you're just saying, I'm not going to have any bad days. I'm going to show up with my A game every day. And I felt so strongly about that 28 years ago, it caused me to stop drinking, because I realized one day that in terms of being a father, being a husband, and especially being a leader and manager at work, I was drinking enough to where I would show up. I didn't feel real good in the morning, and I'd come home and hammer down a few beers at night when I should have been spending more time with my kids. And I said, I'm not showing up with my A game. And I had people tell me, they said, well, if you're going to try to quit, we're a drinking company. That's going to affect your career. And I said, well, it might, but that's one of my core values. And I'll just have to live with it. So I stopped. That was 28 years ago. And 5 years after I stopped drinking, I was the president of the company. So, if you do what your core tells you to do, things will work out for you. And I guess another really important value that I sort of like curiosity, I sort of discovered this one later on, and that's the concept of authenticity. I saw a quote that said, the world cannot resist authenticity. And you think about that, and it's very true. And I can't think of a better trait for a leader to have than just to be who you are, and don't try to be somebody else. I've watched speakers, and I know this lady who was she's older and she's very frail, and she certainly doesn't project when she is speaking to a group. She's a CEO, but she is one of the most authentic people I've ever seen. And when she speaks to a group, that comes through, and the audience is hanging on the edge of their seat. because they just know they're getting who she is, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I love authenticity. I have an example of how I learned this the hard way. I think maybe the first experience I ever had being a manager, I was in my late 20s and I was supervising a small group of draftsmen, and we weren't performing very well. Our production was down, and I had to bring them in and have a heart to heart about our production. And I had this speech that I felt like a manager needed to make when he was going to really choose somebody out. And they came in, and I panicked, because I thought, I just had this real important speech I was going to deliver, and really get on them. And I became so nervous that I had to get up and leave the room and kind of collect myself. And I remember telling my father-in-law, who was really, he was an executive with the Internal Revenue Service, and I was telling him about that. And he said, Bob, you know what? He said, don't ever try to do that. He said, just be yourself. He said, you were disappointed in them. You were, their performance was hurting them. It was hurting you and your perception in the company. And he said, just let that come through. Let your emotion, let your feeling come through, and show. Don't be afraid to show the disappointment. Don't be afraid to show the hurt. Don't be afraid to take some of the responsibility. And boy, that's some of the best advice anybody ever gave me. Just, as anytime I had a tough conversation or a crucial conversation later on in my career, I remembered that advice, and I just kind of came across as I'm me and you're you, and we're going to sit down here and we're going to have a discussion and figure this out together. And so I think authenticity is very important. It's being humble, and I think it's when leaders lose that authenticity, that humility. In my experience, Doug, it is maybe the number one reason leaders fail, is when they lose that. They forget where they came from.
I love that. I love the, bring your A game. I mean, I still do this every morning myself. And it's I try to, whenever one of my folks is having, some tough times, I try to convey the say to them. And that's, as you rise in terms of responsibility and accountability, I mean, it's that shift from, the work you do to more of the decisions you make and how you help your people succeed. But one of the things I tell folks is, the most important decision you can make, and my routine is, it's winning that discussion with the man in the mirror every morning, right? And with me, I'm clean shaven, so I shave every day, and my routine is, look yourself in the eye and decide that you're going to have a good day. Now, that might not be how the day turns out, but you can start there, and
Yep.
No one can take that away from you. No one can make that, but also no one can make that for you. No one can make that decision for you. You have to decide to get up and, like you said, give your A game. You got to decide to get up, be optimistic. You got to decide to get up and make the best of whatever you encounter. And it's so easy. It is easy to come off the rails and forget that and get consumed by the activity and the sentiment and the frustration around you. And, I think that sort of bring your A game, make that very most important decision every day to just enter the day with some optimism, be determined to make it a good day, be determined to help everybody else get a little tiny bit better. And, many, many days will go that way. And the ones that don't, the best thing is they end and you get another shot tomorrow.
Yeah, that's not a bad batting average.
Yeah, exactly.
Another really important value that I think people can work on and master, and that's the one of respect. Respecting yourself, respecting others. I saw a quote that respect is love in action. And if you start with that, if you respect someone, I mean, you know, that is just, it is the highest compliment in the world. I mean, because you're kind of showing you love them, you respect them. And one thing I learned along the path was that if you show people genuine respect, especially older people, they will teach you everything they know. And what a gift! And if you truly look at people and truly have respect for them, everybody has something to share with you. And that's a lesson that you don't have to go learn the hard way. Somebody has taught you that. Somebody has taught you something they've learned from their experiences. And if you go through life and you collect those, you're going to gain some of their wisdom every time that happens. And that's sort of the way I was raised, and it was something that kind of came easy for me. I really didn't have trouble learning to respect people. I think that came across, and I think it was one of the real keys to my success. And it's it's something people can learn and master, and it's really accelerate their development that way.
Yeah, it relates well back to your part of your quote you mentioned earlier about good leaders always showing up, assuming they don't have all the answers, but they're there to help everybody find them, right? And that, to have that, which also goes back to curiosity, but it's that innate sense of having that respect that everybody you encounter has something to give, and really your role as a leader, if you choose to do it, is to try and find out what that is and get them to. And this is a thing I think about, and I've worked with and been and managed engineers, much of my life, and I do think I've found one of the challenges of that is, as you mentioned, that authenticity and sharing the emotion of your sort of the moment, right? Is I mean, a lot of, not the stereotype, but a lot of engineers are reserved and a little more quiet about things in general, and not so comfortable doing that, right? And I do think that is an area where, those that are a bit more technical, maybe more focused on, what's in front of them, and just not as comfortable sharing in that way, right? That's something I've seen leaders, and I've had to get much more comfortable with myself, that just wasn't where I lived naturally on my own, right? Like I had to grow that capability.
Most of us do, Doug. I think that it goes to being vulnerable, and that's being authentic. And we're all vulnerable, and to pretend we're not is trying to hide something, and people can see right through that. And so I've spent a lot of time on self-awareness, and as an individual, and those people who I worked with, and it's all about self-awareness. And it's tough to really be a great leader without a degree of self-awareness. But I think vulnerability is people respect that. Sometimes your ego tells you it's a weakness. It's not. It's a strength.
Right. One of the things we talk about, making decisions and having values. I mean, I think, I asked the question, like, well, how can someone make good decisions that aren't based on those values, right? And that's, just wanted to see if you had thoughts on that. I mean, it's one of those things where when we were trying to put together this sort of discussion framework, it was like, hey, we can't predict what's going to happen in any given day. We can't control what the rest of the world's going to do, right? But we can use this foundation of constants, right? Things that we know are true for us and hopefully true for those around us every day, to try and make better decisions in those moments of uncertainty, right? And obviously with being in the middle of a pandemic and, everything's kind of thrown up against the wall, right? So, that's where I think values become so paramount, is that's your North Star, that you can encounter all this other uncertainty as long as you're certain about those things, right?
I don't know how you could be a good decision maker without knowing what they are and really being fine-tuning them and knowing knowing them in some detail. The world is not black and white. The world is all gray. And as you said, it's getting grayer. One of my values, and I always get some funny looks when I put it out there, is don't ever do anything illegal or unethical. And I was talking to a class at Clemson, and they said, well, duh. I mean, sure you wouldn't do that. And I said, well, I promise you, in your career, you're going to be presented with an opportunity to do both. And I cite the time I raised my hand to move to New Jersey and start an office there for my first company. And being a contractor in New Jersey, I don't want to say anything bad about New Jersey, but the rules up there are a little bit different than they are in North and South Carolina, where I grew up. And I'm starting an office from scratch. And, I had a few contractors and a few suppliers come to me and say, well, we'll give you this cash here if you'll select us for the work. And I'd have people coming to me asking me to give them cash, to do the work. And I said, well, I don't do that. And they would say, well, you're going to have to get used to doing business in New Jersey then, because there's, some of that goes on up here. And I said, well, I understand that may be the way rules may work here and being different from where I'm from, but that's just who I am. I'm not going to do it. I don't do that. And if that causes me to be unsuccessful here, then I guess I'll just have to pack up and go home. And so that was had a few tough conversations, but you know what? 5 years later, we were the most profitable office in my company, and I think maybe we might have even made the culture up there a little bit cleaner, a little more honest. But there was never any doubt in my mind. We had a situation in Charlotte where we were doing a $500 million project for the largest bank in the United States, and their project manager he was from New York, and he kept trying to get my guys to give him housing, give him this, give him that, give him a little cash every once in a while. My guys were like, what do we do? And so I took a risk and I went to the owner and I said, we got this going on. And I said, I don't think you want this going on. I know I don't want it going on. And it really caused a furor. They did not like being accused of that. They were a fairly arrogant customer, but when they did an investigation, they found we were right. They dealt with it, and it really strengthened the relationship between my company and that company. And you're going to be presented with things like that. But when you have those values, and it is who you are and how you're going to act, the decision is easy. You don't have to give it a lot of thought. And the consequences, in my experience, usually are good when you do the right thing and follow your values. So I'm with you. I don't know how you could be a good decision maker without being clear on your values. It's tough enough when you're clear on your values, but it's manageable. I guess the last value I had written down is you'll love this. Dabo Sweeney says the fun is in the winning, and I love that. If you're in a for-profit business, the fun is making money, and just like Dabo's mission is not to win, his mission is to develop young men, and our mission was to give our customers the best construction experience they'd ever had. But you know what? When we did that consistently, we made a lot of money. And when you make money, you're measured by that. Your celebrations are bigger. Your Christmas parties are bigger. You can spend more money reinvesting in your people. And I'm one of these people that doesn't think there's anything wrong with making money. And that's one of my values.
No, that's a great one. Hey, one of the things that I sort of want to ask each of those that join us for this, and it's one of the, I was thinking about it for myself as well, was where was that moment? So just to kind of set it up for you, when you first made the switch from, being an engineer, being doing the work and, getting things done yourself, to realizing that, the job, in effect, if you're going to be in a leadership position, is really entirely about making everyone else successful and finding whatever, and really which means, obviously based in values, but it's whatever they need to be successful, whether that be, air cover on a project, like you said, guidance on, the right thing to do. For me, it was my first sort of management job and running a business unit. It was really hard because, I went from a position of, hey, I just produce, I get a ton of work done, I'll outwork the other guy and, hope that stands for itself and really, make the point I'm trying to make, and just, deliver value. But it was always focused on the work itself, right? And so I went into this position thinking, and I used to show up with my list, and I had, the problem with it was my list, right? So this was, here's the 10 things I really got to get done today. And for the first 6 months I was there, I was never getting those things done. And I was, feeling like a complete failure because I'd always sort of, been disciplined about, know what you want to do, write it down, have objectives, knock them out, right? And couldn't do it because I was spending all my time working with my team on their challenges. I had branch managers all across Texas who, they were in their own operation. They had no one else to turn to really. They were the decision maker and, on their teams. And we had, obviously in my business with hazardous materials and fuels and explosives. And I mean, there's all kinds of things that you encounter that can be really troublesome. And so, every day I was spending hours talking to each of my branch managers, brainstorming ideas, sometimes just commiserating to, they just need someone to talk to because, again, they've got to present that, optimistic, confident face to their team, right? And sort of hold it together when the pressure's on. But it took me, in that experience, 6 months of going home every night feeling like a complete failure to realize, wait a minute, like that is the job, right? It's maybe you get one thing on the list, maybe, but really your list is everyone else's list, right? It's the organization and what it needs to get through their day, their week, their month, their quarter. I just, I was going to ask you, like, is there a moment in your career, was there a moment in your work where that paradigm shift became really, really clear?
Well, that's a great question. I think we all go through that. And we all go through it differently. I think in my case, I was, when I was at Clemson, I was not a good student. And when I left there, I kind of felt like I kind of squandered my opportunity to learn and my parents' money. And I felt I was down on myself. I felt like I wasn't very smart. I wasn't as smart as the people who had done much better than I did there. But then I got into the workplace. I did at night go back and get an MBA, and I learned a lot of the things about management. But when I got into the workplace, I found out that working hard, like you described, working hard came naturally to me. I could outwork most people. I loved it. I loved the how much I got accomplished. I love the recognition I got for that, and I just kept working harder and harder. And then I began to get more responsibility. I was sent to a project where for the first time I had people working for me, and that's where I had the experience I told you about, where I had some draftsmen working for me, and I I struggle with that. But then the company had this project that was in real trouble, and they had the first two project managers had been fired, and they needed a good guy, a person who had good systems experience, and that was me. I had good systems experience, cost, schedule, processes, and things like that. And so they threw me onto this project where we had 90 people reporting to me. And you talk about getting thrown in the deep end. And I realized, okay, buddy, you're in it now, and you better figure out the task that's got to be done, and you better start organizing the people into groups that can do the task. And I was shocked at how well people responded to that. And I think part of it was my naivety. I think I was just, I didn't try to do anything that I had learned my lesson about pretending, and I knew I was over my head, which was step number one. And but just when I realized if I would put my effort in going from hard work, individual hard work, to organizing the work, and then trying to recognize, well, we've got a good group of people over here. We've got a good group of people here. I'm going to assign them to these different tasks, and I'm just going to have them come to me and tell me how they're doing. They really just responded to it very well. And that's when I caught the fire. That's when the leadership thing, the light went off in my head, and I said, man, I like this. I really like this. And I think, and I only brought up the fact that I didn't do well at Clemson because I'm still carrying in my head that I'm not very smart. And I thought, well, maybe I don't have to be that smart. Maybe if I will assemble a group of people who share values, number one, and we trust each other, and we're really out for a common goal. And if I can create an environment for us to work together, to kind of pull together our collective wisdom, nobody can touch us. And that's when I caught the leadership bug. And it just like, but it was almost like I was thrown into it. And I was either going to figure it out or die. And it worked out okay.
Yeah, that's a great answer. It's a crystallizing moment, right? Where you really, and I do think it is, it is like you either figure it out then or you die in a way, right? Like
the road sort of forks,
yeah.
And you're either going to be a nerd in a cubicle when you're 60 years old, or you're going to be running something big because you decided you were going to choose that path. And in a lot of ways, I look back now, and that feeling of not feeling like I was as smart as some other people, in a way, I feel like it was a gift, because I do see a lot of engineers make the mistake of thinking they have to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And if you don't get over that, you can never become a leader. You've got to get over that and realize the power comes in assembling those people around you on your team, and you creating the environment for everything to work.
That's well said. I know we're coming up on our time. I was reading some of the other things that you had said as you'd set up the Clemson work. And one of them stuck with me. Said you're really finding people that have that chip of wanting to help others. And it struck me so strongly because and I was telling my wife the other day, I said that most all the really good, important things that have happened to me personally, most all of them came out of a situation where I was trying to help somebody with something. and, and not, I would have had no way of knowing. There was no way to predict what would have come from that other than, feeling compelled to help them because, if someone needs help and you can, then you should. But it also is striking to me that how much opportunity can flow from that, financially, but just, satisfaction that comes along with it. So I just wanted to, invite you to close with that and the importance of, should you have the opportunity to be a leader and leverage all these things we've talked about successfully, having that focus and that space on making sure you help others along the way.
Yeah, this sort of gets to the essence of why Susan and I set up our professorship. And, we said, the way the two of us want to try to make the world a better place is to create more and better leaders. And we were looking for, and we wanted to do it for the engineering school. I do think, and this sounds arrogant, boastful, but I think you look at the students that are attracted to engineering. They're some of the brightest students, and so I think that's a good place to start. And we wanted to look for students who had that chip, who had the belief, the will that they could make a difference, that they wanted to get the leverage that comes by influencing other people. I was giving a talk to a group of engineering students at Clemson a few years ago, and I was giving this discussion, and I said, I want kids I said, the curse of being a leader is you'll lie awake at night sometimes fretting over why you can't get something done. And this kid came up to me afterwards and he said, I'm the president of the fraternity. And he says, I have a vision for what we ought to be, but it's different from what most people think. And he said, I believe it's the right way to go. And he says, I do wake up at night and I wonder why I can't get people to see what I want to do and to join me in the trip. And I said, man, you're who I'm looking for. And so I do think I don't think you have to wait until you're in your 30s or 40s like I was. I think you can identify those folks when they're at Clemson. And I think that, for those individuals, I encourage them I said, look for every opportunity to lead, whether it's a fraternity athletic team, a classroom project, a campus club, get exposure to the work environment on vacations and holidays and co-opportunities. And one of the best things I've always told people, learn to lead by not being the named leader. Some of the best leadership skills, best leadership I've ever seen is leading from behind. Is just, if you want to lead but you just want to lead by being a member of the team, you really have to sharpen your skills and influence people. But boy, it will do that. I tell folks to, it's important if you and our idea, mine and Susan's idea, was to identify folks and put them in positions through our professorship or what you're doing, Doug, to be able to, once they're identified, and accelerate their development. So they don't have to wait till later. They can begin to develop as leaders in their 20s and 30s. And I think if we do that, we can develop more and better leaders. I do think it's important for them to, I'm a big believer in leadership books, if they're the right books. And, I mentioned Peter Senge and The Fifth Discipline. And You've got, Jim Collins wrote some great books, and I like a lot of his analogies. But I also think that doing this in the School of Engineering is important. My son, Matt, is a good example. He's a mechanical engineer from Clemson, like I am. He went into the corporate world as a contractor and hated it. And he found that his passion was making whiskey. and he applied to one of the top schools in the world for brewing and distilling science to get his master's. And they would only accept chemical and mechanical engineers.
Wow.
Because of heat transfer and all that. And he thought that was a sign. So I think having an engineering degree from Clemson is a great foundation for whatever you do. And I think it's a great place for us to look to for this idea of building, creating more leaders. I do want to cover one last thing if I've got time.
Yep, absolutely.
There's a thought that I've always thought was very important. I always show it with when I'm giving a talk, and it starts with a quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was a U.S. Justice. It says, "The great thing in the world is not so much where we stand as in what direction we are moving." And no matter where you are, it goes back to your point about, no matter how talented you are, if you're going in the right direction, that's a real important start. And then you move to a concept Jim Collins talked about, the flywheel effect, where he said, a big heavy flywheel, those of us in engineering know about that. He says, if you've got everybody on your team and they see one vision and they're working in concert with each other and they're all pushing on that wheel, it starts real slow. But if it's moving in the same direction, it's amazing how in a few months, how far that has come. And I think leaders strive for that alignment, that vision, and put themselves in a position for what I call those defining moments that will come around a few times in your life. And if you've positioned yourself for them, you will see that they have the potential to launch you into orbit if you're prepared for them, and if you have the guts to do them. Steve Farber wrote a little book called The Radical Leap. He calls them OSMs, oh shit moments. And I believe those moments come around in your life, everybody's life. And if you've worked for them, prepared for them, and take advantage of them, great things can happen. And that's why I think that's what our goal ought to be, is to help leaders create more and more of those, and hopefully make the world a better place to be.
That's awesome, Bob. That's that closes well with our framework here, where it's, nail the constants, right? So you're ready for those moments of chaos, and well prepared to make those decisions because of all the hard work you've put in to get there. I think your other point of, and then we'll close with this, but just as the students look at this, as they think about their day, think about their opportunities, is back to that 10,000 hours and never having too much practice before you have to go in and make the play for real, right? Like, so, find ways to start early, take on more responsibility than you're probably ready to handle, and jump in that deep end, as you said, and focus on, organizing the resources and team around you to figure it out and get it done. And, I think that uncomfortableness and being willing to jump into that is just, that in of itself takes practice, right? Like, you have to do that enough to where you can become good at it and actually recover those chaos situations that much faster, because again, you've prepared, you've put in the work, and you've got the practice behind you to to be good at it. It's not because you were born with it, but it's because you put in the effort to build it.
I saw a quote that says, if you do everything you just said, which is important, if you can't overcome the fear, sometimes you got to do it afraid.
Yeah.
But if you prepared yourself for it, and if it's in line with your vision, you got to go for it.
Yeah.
It's really, as you said, it's a manageable process. And if you put a life plan together with the things we've talked about, you can get there. And it's exciting and it's fun. And the great thing about leadership is not only the success the team creates, but watching the fun the team has creating. A high performance team is a wonderful thing to observe and be a part of.
Yeah.
That's the one thing people ask me, well, do you miss anything? Do you miss anything about working now that you're retired? I said, I miss being a part of a high performing team.
Well, and like you said earlier, and like Dabo says all the time, the fun is in the winning. And, you get a high performance team, no wins out of reach. That's the fun part.
Yeah, and I say this a lot when I'm talking at Clemson that guy embodies a lot of the things that we've discussed today. A lot of them. And the results show.
Absolutely.